Okay, now we know the components of light and shadow, all the different elements, what they are, how we can refer back to them. Now, obviously, if you look at this, this is pretty complex. Let's simplify this a little bit. Let's make it a little bit more manageable, because all this stuff is like, lots of different values, halftone, da, 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 da. One basic way you can think about it is to group light and shadow into two separate families, or two separate parts. And obviously, the simplest way to do that is keep them grouped together as either light or shadow. And I'm going to draw a couple different forms here so you can maybe help demonstrate this better. And I'm going to start really simple, only using two groups, two parts, basically light and shadow. And I'm going to leave the white of the paper as the light side, and we're going to use a tone as the shadow side. So there's my sphere, there's my cylinder, and here's my cube or box. And what's cool about this is that here you can see, my line drawing, right? You can see I've kind of drawn through, because we like to do that. We like to think in 3D, draw through, always. What's cool about this idea is that you can even break it down or draw it as a graphic shape, and you can almost begin the almost a three-dimensional feeling, right? You see that? Because your mind will fill in that sphere. See that? When you see that shape. And it's really just using the two values, the light and shadow. Same with this sphere, or this box. Well, this one needs a little bit more information, but you can kind of see, if you were to do this, let's say, right? Now you're starting to get a three-dimensional read almost, because your mind will fill in, right, where I drew it here. And this one, I drew it, but this one you can start to feel it. So that's a cool part about thinking this way. This is simple grouping, light and shadow, light and shadow, light and shadow. No mistake, no differences between each one. They don't really come together. And that's the key to getting this nice, strong readability or recognition, is that you always want to keep the lights really light. In this case, we kept it pure light, and the darks really dark. You don't ever want to go, you don't ever want to make your shadow too light and your lights too dark. Otherwise, you'll lose that illusion. So that's the key. So this is the first way to think about it, basically in really only two values: something light, something dark. In other words, something light, the light side of the form, and the shadow side of the form, using only two values in this case. Now the third way, or the second way, excuse me, is that we can begin to add half-tone or mid-tone. And mid-tone can take a couple different forms, so let's talk about that now and its uses. And we'll also explore value in greater detail. And there's also many, many great lessons on value. Like I said, I learned a lot of this from Steve Houston. You can find his lessons as well, review them. Get confused about the box there. So, now remember, first idea, something light, something dark, the light family and the shadow family. We don't ever cross them. We don't ever mix them up. Keep them nice and dark so we get our nice recognition or readability, graphic read, strong contrast. Another way to think about it, beautiful contrast. Now halftone, to me halftone is, remember we said between halfway between shadow and light, and that's one way we can think about it. We can use halftone to lead the viewer into the light, to make our drawing come into the light, our form come into the light. So you see how it starts to go from flat, now it goes, woo, it starts to curve, you see that? Now see here, this is flat. It's almost like a box, right? The front face of the box, the front side of the box, and then goes right into light. But when we add the halftone, start to turn the form. Now it becomes a more rounded form, you see that? So that's one way to think of halftone. And here, the box form, let's say the light is here, we can show the face that's not quite in light. The light is from above, so it's not quite the top surface of this box. It's not quite the shadow side that's completely in shadow, being blocked, it's blocking the light, but somewhere in between. And that's the key to halftone. It's really, remember, somewhere in between light and shadow. So that's one way to think of halftone, or one way we can use halftone to help transition or turn the form or move from shadow to light. Again, using value to create this beautiful three-dimensional form. So you see how it's all coming together? When you can take your beautiful form drawing, combine it with value, that is powerful. Another way to think of the halftone, you can almost think of it as adding a layer of depth. And we'll cover this too in other lessons, but I just want to touch on it briefly here. Because if you want to show layer depth, what you could do is simply go back to our two value idea, or two families, light and shadow, right? Even though we added halftone, they're still clearly separate. One is still clearly darker than the other. One is still clearly brighter than the other. Then we can even add our halftone here to soften that egg form that I got here, the little ball. And then we can even add halftone. In this case, we're making a little picture, a little thumbnail, a little composition. So you see that? What that does is that separates this shape, or that part of my little thumbnail, from the surface, which is in light. So that's another way you can use halftone in a pictorial sense. And again, we'll go into this in greater detail, and also you can see many more lessons on using values in pictures in the library as well. And the last way that I like to think about halftone is in terms of reflected light. So let me bring in our sphere one more time, and a surface here, shine the light. So I always start this way. Really, it's a cool way to start. I think of a light side, or a light family, a light group, the form and light and the shadow. I kind of draw in the core shadow, which is the border, right? And sometimes I start this way, making it hard, and you saw how we made the halftone. Adding the halftone made it softer. So that's kind of what I did here, using halftone to make it softer. And another way we can think of, and let me add some halftone back here just so you can see this diagram a little bit better. So you can see the light side a little bit better, come off the paper a little bit. We can think of the halftone as the shadow itself. Because remember, halftone isn't just, you know, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, this is 0, this is 10. It's not necessarily 50, right? Or a shadow doesn't necessarily have to be like, in this case, like a number 8 on a 1 to 10. Let's say this is a pure black is 10. This is like a number 8 or a 7. It doesn't have to be that dark. You know, it could be a much lighter value of, in terms of the full range of values you can get, but relative to your picture, your idea, or your sketch, or your drawing, your thumbnail, it's shadow. So this is my shadow value. It's not as dark as what we place here, but this, relative to this image, to this little sketch, this is shadow. Then what we could do, and draw my little diagram here, or my, so far I have light and shadow. Now we can take this guy, put it back into our picture, and to me the best place to put it in our picture is at the core shadow, and I'll show you why in a minute. So remember, a lot of the shadow will receive bounce light. You know, light source will come and boom, reflect back into the object, or light from the environment, the world, will come back and lighten the shadow. So instead of doing this, you know, we don't want to do that. We don't ever want to erase the shadow. That's typically not a good idea, especially if you're brand new to these concepts. That's a dangerous trap because remember, we never want the shadow to be as light as the light family, because then they won't be different. They won't be different. They'll be the same. They won't be different. They'll be the same. We'll talk more about that as well. So I propose that a better strategy would be to take our darker value and simply apply it to the core shadows. You see that? And what that does, I don't know if you can see it. You see what's happening here? What that does is creating the illusion you see that? Of bounce light. You see that? We went from an ordinary idea, kind of a flat, to adding more dramatic light, more dramatic bounce light. We can even take this and add it back into the occlusion. Remember, the occlusion is also known as the contact shadow. That's a part of the shadow. Really, it's the darkest part of the shadow, where the ball touches, or two objects touch, make contact. And it's dark because obviously bounce light can't get in there. It can't penetrate. Right? That's why it's so dark. So you see how we have two ways to apply a simple three-value idea. Something light, something dark, the light family, the dark family, and something in between. It's a third neighbor or a cousin if these are two families, and we can apply it in three different ways. In this case, we use the light or the halftone family in a pictorial way to create a background, a sense of depth. In this case, we reserved the dark side. Basically, we added a dark to the shadow family, and we're able to create the effect of bounce light simply by correctly or intelligently placing a dark into our scene, into our drawing here. So that's components of light and shadow, the anatomy of light and shadow. Simple ways you can use it and apply it and get a lot of mileage out of it. Simply two values, three values, and ways you can use it. Now let's define specifically what the laws of light are and how they work and how we can use them.
There is a lot of value in online art education. We have so much great instruction on NMA that is so easily accessible. Even when I was in school learning to draw and paint, nothing was online. Wherever you are in the world, you can get this instruction. And not only can you watch these lessons that are so valuable and so in-depth and so passionately instructed, but you can watch them again and again and again.